So one of the big motivations for me leaving Discord was how much social anxiety I experienced from having having been talking to as many people as I was, and for a while I had thought that if I was just alone in my room, I would be feeling less anxiety. And in the beginning, that was very true. I had less anxiety from being in my room much more. But it's gotten to the point now where my sleep has gone back into the pattern of being so inconsistent again that I end up just intrinsically getting anxiety from sleep deprivation. And so that's a circle that I can't really square. That's a problem I've had my whole life where just about every single different thing that I throw at it hasn't been able to fix the problem. It's just part of my biology. I just have sleep problems. Um, and so now I'm starting to feel pretty significant anxiety just on my own, while at the same time becoming comfortable enough with myself to bear the brunt of saying dumb things sometimes. But there's things I've said on this channel and in other places that have been really silly that just weren't factually correct. They may have had elements of the truth in them, but um, did not did not meet the requirements to be called true, and that's really embarrassing for me. Like I feel really bad when I do that, and so I try to like listen to criticism um, and address those problems as they come up. But it's gotten easier for me to do that. Like I feel like I've been microdosing. I've been microdosing on people's reactions to the things that I say, where it's gotten easier to not just completely go insane because now I'm starting to get used to, the idea that I'm going to mess up, that I'm imperfect. And I mean, I've always known that. I've always been very critical of myself, but the idea of showing that in public, even though I've been doing YouTube for 5 years, is still a really difficult thing for me. Um, and like it feels like it's a physical it feels like the anxiety is deeply physical when I mess up. And perhaps it's just early childhood experiences being called back there, but regardless of what it is, um, it's still happening. It's still happening right now. So maybe I need to watch more anime. Maybe I need to watch more anime until this problem goes away. Maybe at some point in the near future, I just go back and I just limit who I talk to. I'm not talking to a billion people at once anymore. The thing is that it just makes me feel really guilty because when I left in a really dramatic way. Um, I left, making it sound like it was an ultimatum. I left the option open for me to come back, but like it, I feel really bad about the way that some people may have felt after seeing that, and then for me to just come back eventually, it feels like kind of a punch to the face, um, and so I don't like that on a purely like guilt level, and then I don't like the idea that some of the problems I've had are going to come back into focus. My problem with using the site way too much because I'm just always in the room, for example. That I know that would come up again if I started now, or I have to get to a point where that wouldn't come up. I have to get to a point where um, I'm different enough for that problem not to be there. And I got some time. I got some time to go. Can't do everything right now. Um, but I've been starting to get a bit lonely. And maybe I just need to hashtag get good and focus on doing more things I enjoy, but I have been starting to get lonely. So the prospect of me going back, I think it is there. It's just a matter of when, why, and how. Um, but like, it's making me realize there really is no easy solution to my anxiety. Because the way I was thinking of it was that if you just remove the problem, the anxiety is not going to exist anymore. But inevitably, other things come up that will induce a sense of anxiety regardless. Um, and so, you know, it's one of those things where I just got to deal with it. I think I need to start being significantly more conservative about my heart. Um, because for my entire life, I've had pretty severe sleeping problems. Randomly, I'll be awake for multiple days at once for seemingly no reason. I will end up having issues with sleeping for a few hours and then continuously waking up again and again, or just waking up once and then not being able to get back to sleep. And part of it, part of it is due to PTSD. Like when you have PTSD, your sleep cycle gets significantly disrupted. Like I could chalk it up to nightmares on the one hand, where a lot of the time when I get a nightmare related to PTSD, I actually like wake up like in shock. I've woken up and gotten panic attacks before from nightmares that I had related to trauma. So that certainly doesn't help my sleep by any means. But I think, when I complain about, or when I have complained about heart palpitations, like I've always gotten them from stress, but I think a lack of sleep exacerbates this problem because if you have insomnia for long enough, it can take a toll on your heart health. Your heart health starts degrading if you're not getting the right sleep. And when I was younger, when I'm talking like middle school here, when I was in middle school, I would go like 4 days without sleeping. That's insane. That had to have done some kind of, at least a little bit of heart damage, or brain damage or something. It's insane. Um, and so I've always been pretty like carefree about my body. Like there's a lot of things I try to be aware of what the thing is going to do, or if I'm going to do something, I try to do it in the safest way that I can. But like, I mean, there are things I've done where I could have died, you know, where it may not have been a huge possibility, but it was like a 10% chance. Most people aren't willing to take a 10% chance, or 20%, or 30%, 40% chance. I don't think I've been in a situation where it was a 40% chance, unless we're talking about just an accident. Um, but, you know, like, most people aren't as carefree as I am because they haven't been depressed their whole life. Like, I've taken an attitude of it doesn't really matter what happens to me because ultimately the risk and reward between what might happen um, is, like if there's a positive outcome that's possible and the positive outcome is likely, then I would take the chance just so the positive outcome would happen, even if the negative outcome could potentially happen. Um, and so, like I've made a lot of choices with eating. Um, with how my body is taken care of, etc., that I've probably piled onto this sleeping issue because I've just been carefree about the way that I do things. I've spent a lot of days intentionally staying awake for multiple days when I already have a problem with doing it by accident, you know? Like those videos I've made of me being awake for multiple days. I was having heart trouble through a lot of those days. It's something I was doing to myself, you know? And I mean, it was based from a psychological standpoint. It was a cool feeling to be in. But the question then comes down to, is this feeling worth, or the novelty of this feeling worth, the damage I'm potentially doing? And it can be difficult to square that circle. I mean, it's not really that difficult for me because I just go, well, I don't really care. But not really caring, not really caring can get you into a messy place if you're not careful. So I'm trying to be more careful. Um, but yeah, I. It's like it's been like this for so long that I have the inability to fear the idea of me dying, and I realize that like our perception of what death is going to be when it comes is um, ultimately limited. But how am I supposed to be afraid of something that's going to happen anyway, you know? How am I supposed to perceive it as a bad thing when it's something that for a large portion of my life I've wanted to happen? Um, you know, the idea of whatever exists after death, for me, for a long time, even if I didn't know what it was, I mean, I have a pretty good feeling it's just not existing. You just cease to exist because, you know, your brain's not working, and your brain is kind of responsible for how you're feeling things and thinking things. Um, Even though I have a pretty good feeling about that, it's like I don't know. I can't guarantee you what it would be after. Um, but I just don't care because it's going to happen anyway. How? Why? Why would I have any opinion on that other than why would I care if it's going to happen anyway, you know? Um, it comes off really weird to me when I see people who are afraid of dying. Like, I've almost died multiple times. And I came very, very close. To, I just don't care. Um, you know, like I'm not completely reckless once again, but it's very difficult to explain what this feels like to people because most people are in the mindset of self-preservation. They're either NPCs or just very reasonable, and I'm not particularly reasonable, and so um, I find videos of me randomly staying awake for multiple days, even though it has some impact on my physical health. You know, my heart really does bother me quite a bit. You know, when I lived in Virginia, I had a blood pressure test done and some other tests, and I was told that my blood pressure was at the level of someone who was in their 70s. It was like at the level of like an old person. That I had an extremely unhealthy blood pressure due to extreme stress. And around that time as well, I had been experiencing heart palpitations uh, that were so extreme that I actually fell over. I would fall over because of how bad the heart palpitations I was getting due to stress. And At one point, like, I almost passed out. I could not properly breathe as I was getting these heart palpitations. It was like I my vision became like borderline tunnel vision. It was so bad that I part of me thought I might actually die because I had never been in an experience where my breath was that short and my heart was beating so irregular because at first it was just like fast and hard, but at that point when I was like on the floor, it it was beating in such a weird pattern that I had never seen my heart do that before. And it was mainly tied to how much stress that I was under. I'm the kind of person where my hair falls out when I'm dealing with significant stress, and it just so happens that significant stress is in my brain. It's just in my brain, um, because of trauma and other things. And so it's difficult to deal with, like on a daily basis. Where I used to be afraid of the idea of being with someone romantically and then them seeing me, like them sleeping with me, seeing me wake up in the middle of the night because I'd be having a nightmare, and or someone trying to wake me up in order for, like us to go do something, or if I had something to do that day. And then the way that I react in shock when someone wakes me up, I will literally recoil onto my bed. Like, I'll jump up when someone wakes me up or moves my body around as I'm sleeping to wake me up. And I will just like jump up out of the bed and like recoil into my position and have my my arms clenched, like like something is about to fight me, like like something is trying to kill me, and it's just from being woken up. Um, I get panic attacks sometimes. Um, I get well, I don't. Yeah, I don't want to talk about that. I I think I need to start. I need to I need to do something. The thing is that when I say that I need to do something, like there's so many things that I've already tried to do. Like, I've taken so many different medicines for sleep from the doctor, and some of them have worked decently. It worked some amount of the time, but most of the time the ones that work well always end up ceasing to work after some time. And you could tell me to change my diet, but like I I can't really afford to change my diet. I have been buying like beans and some other healthy foods that you can get on a budget. I've read articles on diet and stuff and have used that to make shopping lists before. But like in general, the stuff that gets bought for food has to be shared with the other people in the house. So it's not like I'm really just feeding myself. I'm also feeding everyone else who lives here if I go that route. And so like the amount of food I buy won't necessarily last a long time. Um, and so eating healthy consistently ends up just going above the kind of budget that I have, and that ends up making me feel very frustrated. So yeah, I got some glaring health issues, and I ought to address it somehow. When I lived in Virginia, they were going to they were going to give me beta blockers because I had the test at the psychiatrist. They wanted me to see a primary care doctor in order to have beta blockers prescribed. And so I thought probably, see, I thought psychiatrists gave them for anxiety. I might be misremembering that, or I might just be misinformed. I thought they gave them for anxiety. I don't know. I guess this doctor was just extra cautious. I don't know. But I ended up leaving the state before that I could go to that appointment. To that appointment. And, I don't know. A big mess. Big mess. But I think not being super active also probably plays a part. Like, I haven't really been active basically for my whole life. And when I was younger, I had a justification for it because when I was younger, like, we didn't have food in the house. And so, in order to conserve my energy, um, I would just, I would just lay down. Is if you lay down, if you're hungry, you're not going to be expending as much energy. Like, I've talked about collapsing in this video as if it's like a meme at this point, just because I mentioned it so much, but I would collapse from not having enough food, you know? Um, it would get so bad where if I hadn't eaten for a couple days, I would just collapse if I had to physically exert myself too much. It was really, really painful. And when you're going through that as a little kid, that's got to affect your heart somehow, right? Because your body is developing. Like I was born with tachycardia. They had to do some kind of operation on me when I was like less than 1 year old after coming out of the womb because I had to come out of the womb early. I was supposed to be born in like May or something, but I ended up being born April 29th. And of course, my tachycardia got fixed. They did the ablation and everything, and then my heart doctor told me that my heart is actually better than the average population's heart, but no, that doesn't remove the damage that was probably done from not eating very well for a long time at a young age, and from these sleep troubles that have gone into some pretty serious territory. Um, so I don't know. Um, like a lot of the time, it feels like the idea of these problems getting fixed is just kind of hopeless because I've tried to get more active, and that hasn't really improved my sleep. Well, going to the gym or doing exercises at home, having long walks every day, that I get to the point where I just give up because I'm not having the kind of results I want, which is better sleep. It's not really affecting anything. Um, and when I was younger, I had an excuse because there was either tachycardia or like significant food problems. Well, nowadays, I don't really have an excuse other than I just don't want to do it because, like, I'm naturally skinny. That's the thing, is that before it was poverty and hunger, but now it's just I'm naturally skinny because my metabolism I inherited the metabolism of my father and grandfather, who were both very skinny people for their entire lives. My grandpa died very skinny, um, and I mean he had done, how old was he? He was like 79. Let's say he was like 78 or 79. And I mean, he wasn't the safest with his body. Would smoke cigarettes constantly. Constantly he would smoke cigarettes. And I like he had so many Marlboros all over the room, all over the wall and stuff. I don't know how. I don't know how he survived that long when he would smoke just constantly. Um, he had he had used cocaine and stuff like that when he was younger, if I recall right. So his heart wasn't perfectly up to shape. I believe he had to take like beta blockers alongside narcolepsy medicine, which I think those two cancel out one another. So I don't know exactly what his medicine schedule was like, but he had narcolepsy, but he also had heart issues. And so, no, he died at a later date than most people in the US would at the time. He had a longer lifespan, but you know, he also died a preventable death because the doctors had given him penicillin when he was deathly allergic to penicillin and died. He didn't have to have penicillin, it was just that my cousin, who was there at the hospital with him, didn't emphasize to the doctors not to give him penicillin. He probably wouldn't have died if he didn't take that. Um, so he could have been alive for a year more, maybe several months more. It's longer than the average person would have lived. And I mean, how do you explain these things? Like, all over the world, every day you have people going into their 90s who have smoked cigars their whole life. Cigars, the equivalent of a pack of cigarettes. Um, and on some level, it's just genetic. So you have people who are much more damaged by these things, other people who aren't. Um, yeah, it's very weird the world we live in. Like, there's so many people every year who have damaged their bodies to sometimes an insane degree, and they end up living these long lives. Like, for the amount my grandpa smoked, it was just all the time. He lived a fairly long life. It's weird. It's weird the way this works. Now, something tells me I'm probably going to live a shorter life than the average person. Like, maybe because I know stress reduces the time of your life. And with the amount of stress I feel, maybe it'll reduce mine. Maybe heartaches by the number. Heartaches heartaches by the number are gonna put a number on me. Um I don't know.